Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we're going to be creating a factory room and adding windows in, all using Unreal's built-in geometry brushes. Let's dive in and see how they work. So it's not generally best practice to be editing the default minimal level. We want to be creating our own. So let's go ahead and do that first of all. We're going to go to the File menu and hit New Level and select the Template Default and hit Create. In newer engine versions, your choice is going to look different. In this case, instead of using template default, please use the basic here and click create. And you're going to end up with a level that looks a little bit different to what you're seeing in this lecture, but for all intents and purposes, it should serve the same purpose. And this gives us a little world with a nice sky sphere so that we've got clouds, and some of the default lighting in here is good too. So that's a good start. I'm going to delete the floor, because what we're going to be doing in this lecture is creating our own geometry, blocking out geometry using the built-in Unreal Geometry Brushes, which are sometimes also known as BSP, which stands for Binary Space Partitioning, which is really the technical details of how they work, so that's not as informative. I will be calling them geometry brushes. Now, the place that we go to add geometry brushes is the toolbar to the quickly add, and then we go to the Place Actors panel, which is going to give us lots more functionality than that little menu provides us. And then at the top of the Place Actors panel, you can see there are different sections, and one section is the Geometry tab. Let's go ahead and click on that, and you can see the basic building blocks of geometry that we can place with geometry brushes. You've got stairs, you've got spheres, cylinders, cones, and boxes. So we're going to start by putting in a box brush. And you can see that it instantly starts with a little bit of a wireframe and then it fills it out. And that's because these brushes can work in one of two ways. They can build up your geometry by kind of creating it, or they can carve it out by subtracting it. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to create a little bit of a warehouse room, and we're going to achieve that by creating an outer box, which builds out a box that's the entire room, and then we're going to carve out the inner section. So let me show you how this works. First of all, rename it in the outliner so we can keep track of it. So select the box brush in the outliner and hit F2 to rename it, and we're going to call this the walls. Then we're going to go ahead and scroll down in the details pane to where it says brush settings, and this gives us the size of the brush. Now, you can scale brushes up and down using the scale property of the transform, but that's not recommended because it's not going to correctly scale materials when we apply those later. So don't touch the scale properties if you want your materials to look good. Instead, go down to your brush settings and you can tweak the size in here. So I'm going to size my room to be about 34 meters long. So that's 34 times 100 in centimeters. It's going to be 27 meters wide. And the height I'm going to give, which is the z-axis, is going to be 7.6 multiplied by 100, which gives us 760. And that's going to give us a roughly kind of sports hall sized area, hopefully. And we can tweak this when we bring in our assets to just check whether they are the right size. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our walls brush and we're going to duplicate it by selecting in the outliner, doing a copy and paste. And I'm going to call this walls subtract. And we'll see why we called it subtract in just a second. But we're going to go over back to our walls brush because I want to expand that walls brush so it's slightly bigger than the walls subtract brush, which is going to slot inside of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to each of the dimensions X, Y, and Z in the brush settings, and I'm just going to add 200, equivalent to adding 2 meters to each one of these. And with that done, we're going to go back to our walls subtract brush in the outliner and scroll down to the brush settings where it says brush type. Here we want to select, instead of additive, we want to select subtractive, which means that this brush is going to carve away geometry rather than add it into our scene. Once we do that, you can see that we've got a little room, because what we've done is we've created a solid volume with the walls brush, and then we've taken away scooped out the center using the walls subtract brush. Now, before we go any further, we should save this new level that we've created. So Control S will bring up the save dialog, and we can put it in the root of our content. I'm going to call this the main map. Just like that, just main. And what we want to do is also set it as the default when we start up the editor and when we start up the game. So we go to the settings button on the toolbar, project settings, and then with our project settings, we go to the project section in the left and maps and modes. And then here there are two properties we want to change, the editor startup map and game default map. Both of these need to be our new main level. And then we can go ahead and close our settings again. And this will open up in the future when we open our project. Now, I'd like at this point to bring in some of the industry props that we have. And the way we're going to do this, I'm just going to clear the filter by going to the filter button and hitting reset filters. Then I'm going to open the industry props pack folder. Then I'm going to go into meshes. And I'm going to bring in the tallest item I know of, which is the rack. So I drag in the rack into the scene, and you can see that the size of this rack is just about right for the size of the room. So I'm fairly happy that we've created a good size of warehouse. Now, I'd like to challenge you to make some windows. The way we can do this is by adding some new box brushes into the scene and making them subtractive, first of all, because we want to carve out those windows, and then position them in the walls and size them appropriately so that they punch holes through the walls and give you a nice window. Pause the video and see if you can do this. Okay, welcome back. Let me show you how I would approach this. So I'm going to start off by making a hole in this wall to my left. I'm going to take a box brush and drag it on to the wall itself. Now, I want the size, the dimension of this to be large enough so that I can poke it through the wall. So first of all, let's go down to make it subtractive. So we go to brush type and change it to subtractive. And then we're going to push it through the wall until it makes a nice little hole. So there I've got a window already, but what I want to do is actually change its height and width a little bit. So its height would be the Z dimension. I'm going to try making that 400 and see if I like the look of it. Yes, it's a nice tall window, looks a little bit industrial. So now we've got a window that I like the look of. I'm going to rename the actor in the outliner. So I'm going to select it and hit F2, then I'm going to call it window, just so we've got these windows named and sorted. Then I'm going to hit Alt while dragging on the red arrow to create a duplicate window that comes out named as window 2, which is great. And in fact, I want to put these windows all inside a folder in the outliner. So I'm going to select them both, right click them and click move to, create new folder and call this windows. Then selecting our window 2, I can keep dragging all the way across the room. Remembering to release Alt between dragging, and that creates a new duplicate every time. And then to make a copy of those windows across the room, I'm going to select them with a shift click in the outliner, and using an Alt click on the green arrow, I'm going to duplicate them onto the other wall. And there you have it, windows on both sides of our newly created Geometry Brush factory room. I'll see you in the next lecture.